Hi, I'm Gary, and this is episode 119 of EV Musings, a podcast about renewables, electric vehicles, and things that are interesting to electric vehicle owners. On the show today, we'll be looking at an important topic that gets very little coverage: charger safety. This season of the podcast is sponsored by ZapMap. Before we start, I wanted to let you know that if you're new to the podcast, welcome. With numbers growing, it's possible that many people are coming in at, episode 100 and above, and are missing out on some of the good stuff from earlier episodes, particularly people who are new to electric vehicles. If that's the case, can I recommend having a quick search for episodes with the word basics in the title? We have shows there covering the charging cables, the costs of charging, and how you actually use the chargers themselves, and it's probably a very good way to start if you're new to the whole world of electric vehicles. Our main topic of discussion today is charger safety, and I'm not talking about whether the electronics are connected up correctly, or whether there's a chance that you'll get fried if you try and charge in the rain. You won't. I'm talking about the feeling of physical security you need when charging your car at a charge unit. It's all well and good going on about how bad petrol is, but at the end of the day, 99.9% of petrol stations are fairly large, well-lit spaces on public roads. Whilst there are incidents and assaults that occur there, they're not widespread, and the vast majority of drivers don't feel concern or anxiety at having to use a petrol station at night. But look at the vast majority of the current chargers, rapid and high-powered, and quite a lot of the 7kW chargers. They're usually single or double units in car parks somewhere. They might be in a pub or a hotel car park, around the back of a restaurant, or in a park and ride somewhere. There was one near me, thankfully closed down now, which was literally down a half-mile long narrow side lane in an unlit car park surrounded by woods. The majority of these units don't have well-lit areas, and if you're a lone individual late at night, it can be quite intimidating. Fully Charged presenter Maddie Moat posted a tweet last year highlighting how unsafe she felt while charging at just such a location. And this isn't a one-off either. Today I'm talking with Kate Tyrell. Kate has been driving an EV for about a year and a half now. It's a Hyundai Kona. And her day job is working with My Energy in Humberside, who are the makers of the Zappi home charger. However, she lives on the south coast, which means she spends a lot of time travelling to and fro between the sites. She has therefore needed to charge in many locations, not all of which could be classified as, quote, single female friendly, unquote. In fact, it was while returning from a trip to Humberside when she found herself at 11 p.m. at night in a dimly lit car park in Farnham with a charger that refused to work, a number of youths hanging around nearby, and a battery that was down to its last few percent state of charge because the previous charger she tried didn't work, that she then decided something needed to be done. Seeing the issues that have occurred with the state of chargers and charger safety, she started an initiative called ChargeSafe, which will inspect every charger and location, give it a rating which covers safety and accessibility, and share this information with EV drivers and Chargepoint operators. Whilst at COP26 in Glasgow last year, she pitched this idea to a number of people, including Edmund King, the president of the UK's Automobile Association, the AA, and the reception was very, very good. Naturally, I wanted to chat with Kate, so I asked her to come on the show and talk about this initiative. I wanted to start by asking her some specific process questions about the data collection side of ChargeSafe. There's obviously three aspects to this. There's the aspect of who's defining the standards against which the charges are going to be evaluated. There's then who's going to be collecting the data to be put into the database. And then there's how is the data going to be disseminated out to the Chargepoint operators and the general public. So where are we getting the standards from?
So the standards, the measurements, so the weighting of how we're going to produce these ratings actually originally came from Twitter, which I appreciate sounds completely amateur, but when you look at the EV community on Twitter, there's nobody better to really ask. These are the early adopters. These are the people who are driving electric vehicles day in, day out, who use all of the Chargepoint networks. And we went out to them simply to say, what would make you feel safer when charging? So we kind of went backwards from their answers. People saying, I prefer better lighting. I prefer an emergency call button. I prefer to know that there are security cameras at the site. And we started working that into a measurement. And then I thought about my own personal experiences and what might make me feel safer at a charge point. And we came together with a huge list of the must-haves and the like-to-haves.
Mm-hmm.
And approached the EVA, so EVA for England, EVA for Scotland, spoken to the Irish EV Owners Association and other colleagues across the industry just to say, what do you think about this? We're looking at 3 key areas. We're looking at the environment where the charge point is placed, the facilities around the charge point, and the charge point itself. We're also going to factor in accessibility, which will mainly be around the charge point itself. And from the back of that, we've come through some pretty big obstacles in terms of what is objective and what is subjective. Something like the local crime rate within the vicinity of the charger itself. We had originally thought it would be clever to factor in the crime rate within a mile radius of the postcode of where the charge point was located over the last 90 days, and we've since kind of dropped that and softened it to a public question, which will be, do you feel safe at the charger? Because actually the charge point operators can't help what the crime rate is where they decide to put the installs, much like the oil and gas industry wouldn't have not built a petrol station somewhere because it had a high crime rating. So it's things like that. As we go through this process, we will be refining the measures and we'll be asking for the EV community's feedback as we go. But we are also looking to get an accreditation in place, a certification of a ChargeSafe rating, so that it will be independently verified by a third party. They will look at the competency of the inspectors themselves, so the people who will be having a look at the charge points, and then also making sure that the assessments that they're doing are impartial and independently verified.
I mean, I think that's excellent. But what jumps to mind there is, and this comes back to what you were talking about in terms of objective versus subjective. I assume you've been to the Milton Keynes Coachway.
Do you know what? I haven't. I know, it's really bad. The thing is, every time I drive through Milton Keynes, it's to get to Grimsby. So I don't have enough time to just stop and look around. I'm just pushing on through to get to the office. I feel really guilty now. No, it's on my to-do list, Gary. Yeah. Don't worry.
Well, the Milton Keynes Coachway, I mean, you've seen pictures, I assume. It's it has the canopies over it. It's got 8 units there. There's 12 if you include the Ionity ones that are nearby. So it's not a single unit. It's well lit. Well, I say it's well lit. They are motion sensitive lights. So if you're outside the car and you're moving around, it's perfectly well lit. The whole place is like a Christmas tree. But if you don't move for a while, it goes into total darkness. It's next to the coach station. Yeah. So there's a lot of people in and out at various times of the day. So I'm looking at that and thinking instinctively that would probably rate reasonably well on whatever scale that you're going to put together. But having said that, it is out on the edge of a car park. Yeah. And if it is, 3 o'clock in the morning, there's not going to be anybody there at the station. It is a little bit remote. It's not very hospitable. There's nothing around there because it's basically at the end of a car park. So, things like that. How is the objective versus subjective part of an evaluation going to come in on something like that?
So this is why it's so important that we have the human element, being the inspectors physically visiting this site. It's not a case of looking up a photo on Google and saying, oh yeah, that looks safe. By physically visiting the site, we will be able to put ourselves into a position where we're really thinking as a chargee. I mean, I'm looking at photos of this right now, so I'm kind of guilty of that. But the bay sizes for disabled access doesn't look fantastic off of first glance. There are bollards in front of the charge points. The cable management looks like it could be quite difficult for somebody who's in a wheelchair, and certainly if your charging port is at the front of the car and the cables are short, how are you going to be able to park far enough away from the charger to fit a wheelchair in front of that to then pull the cable down and plug it into the front of the car? So those are things that we really need to, when we're there, put ourselves into that position and really consider the real world challenges that are presented. So that will go into the ratings. And the way that the ratings are weighted is based on this. So there is more importance placed on elements than there are on others. For example, lighting is a much higher importance to have on a site than something like an air tire pump. So that being a nice to have, if your tires need a little bit of air, great, would be like a point fraction tinier percentage of the overall weighting of that score than lighting, or how easy it is to access the LED screen, how well lit is the LED screen, what's the ease of payment like, and even something that came up on Twitter this week was about the refund of a pre-authorization charge.
Oh, yes.
I won't say who, Gary, but there is
but I think we know who we're talking about.
There is a network that are taking a pre-authorization fee of £30, mm-hmm. and they may not refund it for up to 30 days. Yeah. Now, I have personally fallen victim to this with a different Chargepoint operator, whereby I've paid my pre-auth fee, I've connected the car, I've popped into the services, and then I've come back and my car's decided it's not going to charge anymore. So because I've already used my last £15 to pre-authorize that charge, I don't have another £15 to pre-authorize the second charge, mm-hmm. or even drive to another charger down the road to hopefully pre-authorize a charge with another network operator, to the point where actually, bless him, Maz Shah, love him, actually sent me a tenner to help me on that one occasion because I was freaking out on Twitter about it. And he said, Kate, let me help you. So he sent me a tenner just to get me out of the spot of bother, which was great. But if that's late at night and you have to pay a £30 pre-authorization fee and you've only got 50 quid in your account, you connect the charger, it takes the money, but then the charger fails to communicate with your car, but you don't have another 30 quid. And what if you're too far away to get to the next charger? Then what happens? So again, that is a subjective thing because it could put someone in danger, mm-hmm. but it's not immediately obvious.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean?
I do. And that then moves me on nicely to the next part of my question, which is who are you going to get to do these evaluations? What's that process going to be like?
Okay, so we have ambitions. Mm-hmm. We have big ambitions to employ a nationwide team of inspectors, which is going to be quite a task. But, we have floated the idea. We've put out an announcement saying when we're ready to employ inspectors, visit this page and register your interest. And since doing that, we've had over 30 people come forward and say, yeah, I could do this job. So it will be a case of employing full-time employed inspectors who will spend their days merrily driving around in a company electric vehicle, which will be supplied to them, to visit charge points using our measurement system, which will be completed on an online form on an iPad and sent back to us at the head office, mm-hmm. to process the data. Yep. All they really need is a driving license and to just be a good person, I think, to show that they're upstanding, moral, ethical values and passionate about the planet and safety, and just being able to really look at the chargers in a very different way. So, this whole unbiased thing really, really comes into play here. So these people are going to need to approach a charger almost blind to the branding of that charger, mm-hmm. and to assess it purely on the inspection methods that we have requested. So there must be absolutely no benefit to the network itself. There can't be any favoritism. There can't be, nobody's going to be bought over this. If they're a subscriber, then great, they'll get more of the information that they need. If they're not a subscriber, fine, because this score serves the EV drivers, not the networks.
Now, there's a couple of questions that sort of jump out to that immediately, going back to the discussions that we've already mm-hmm. or had. We've talked about the fact that if you go to a particular charger during the day, it's a completely different experience to going to that same charger at 2:00 in the morning, or
yes.
Something like that. So presumably the whole sort of remit of the inspectors will be to visit chargers at different times of the day and or night to check what the lighting's like, for example.
Indeed, yes. So there
Yeah.
will be an AM and PM setting that they can tick when they visit the charger, so that we understand whether the rating was made in the darkness or during the daytime when it's nice and light. Um, and yeah, their hours can be totally flexible. So the inspectors will all be employed full time, but they will actually be working a 4-day working week. We're very passionate about that, and we'd like them to be as productive on those 4 days as possible, but without compromising their own health and safety and not speeding around to all of the charge points. So we'll have very realistic measures in place. But if they would rather do one evening of charge point inspections and 3 daytime inspections, then fine. If they've got families and they need to be flexible around their family schedules, absolutely fine. As long as they get the 4 days done in a 7-day week period, we don't mind. And that's what we want to do. We want to have people who are just super positive and motivated to deliver a fantastic quality service.
And if we're looking at one of the other things that you've already talked about, which is accessibility, do you feel that somebody who doesn't necessarily have a disability would be able to assess that appropriately, or to the same level to which someone who does have a disability would be able to assess it?
I mean, I would like to hope that an able-bodied person, that is the right terminology,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
I would like to think that an able-bodied person would be able to really put themselves into a position where they are looking at it from an accessibility issue. So, if they put themselves at a wheelchair height, can they reach the cable? Can they reach the screen? Can they access the payment options? But likewise, I would love to have disabled people and able people working for the business, because it's really going to give us that depth of ensuring that the inspections are as accurate as possible. So there's nothing to stop somebody who has an EV, maybe from like Motability or something, coming on board as an inspector. But they will be receiving training. So regardless of their ability, everybody will be given in-house training as to what to look out for on a charge point. We'll take them out on field trips to chargers to show them what to look out for, and there'll be full support from us at head office, and if we need any wider support from the actual networks themselves, if they want to give us any training on how their particular charge points work, then even better. It's like I say, it's a collaborative issue. It's something that affects every electric vehicle driver, so we're more than prepared to work with everyone on this matter.
This is going to sound like I'm playing the gender card, but it isn't at all.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a case that, if we talk about the circumstances you found yourself in, late at night at a dark remote charger, would a male in the same position have had a different view of the safety of that? And would that be reflected in sort of the ratings that are gathered? Or are we trying to get this as gender neutral as possible?
I would like to be aiming for as gender neutral as possible, but I do appreciate that there are differences, and that sometimes can't be avoided. So if it's a male visiting a charge point, I will be asking them to, assess it as if it was for their wife, daughter, grandchild. Like, we really need to be thinking about safety on a whole.
Yeah.
Regardless of whether you are a man or a woman, if something doesn't feel safe, I think we all know in our gut that it doesn't feel safe. So yeah, we'll definitely be covering that off in training. Even if you feel safe, great. If you do martial arts, great. If you're 7 foot, brilliant. But how would you feel if it was, your wife, supposing that they have a wife, attending this charge point?
Yeah. Yeah, I know the reason I didn't really want to play the gender card there is because in a recent conversation that I've had where we'll be discussing this, it was quite rightly pointed out that it's not something that just affects lone females. There can be lone males in the same situation who would feel just as unsafe or as insecure.
Yeah, 100%. And this is really important as well. It's not just women who feel unsafe. anyone can feel unsafe, and everybody has the absolute right to be scared if they want to be scared. It's not a case of, oh, you're a man, you should feel safe
Mm,
in the dark, because no, we're all human.
absolutely.
And I do think that that gets talked about a lot, is women charging cars, or women being on their own at night. Yes, it's awful, and we know from the statistics that women are attacked more than
Hmm.
men.
Yeah,
But that doesn't stop the validation of a man feeling afraid at a charge point.
absolutely. And the third sort of factor that we were talking about earlier on is you've got all this data together. Talk to me about sort of sending that out. You've already mentioned that you're going to try and get this on to the presumably the plug shares and the Zap Maps and the WhatsApp and those kind of apps, so that they've got the rating. Which networks, which of those apps are you in discussion with at the moment? Are you able to
Ooh.
divulge that information?
Okay, so I've definitely signed an NDA with one of them,
Okay.
who are very, very keen to work with us. But yeah, of the ones that you've just mentioned, I would say at least three of them I've been in talks with.
Mm-hmm.
I think you mentioned three anyway, and we're looking to widen that. So I personally, when I do long distance journeys, I have been known to use Waze an awful lot.
Mm-hmm.
I find this particularly important since driving an electric vehicle, because it warns you of speed traps, which is very useful when you're using that talk and you do forget. So, cruise control gets used a lot when I'm driving on the motorways, just to regulate my speed and make sure that I'm not being a little bit heavy on the old accelerator. But I would love to get Waze on board for that information. I don't feel like they do enough in terms of the EV charging network anyway. And then we have got those favorites, ZapMap is an incredible mapping system.
Mm-hmm.
Mel and the team have done such a great job of mapping out the UK. WhatsApp, I love the way that Mike has kind of brought that product out. I think it was for his mum. Initially, he wanted to just really simplify being able to find a charger, and again, that app deserves huge kudos for what it's achieved. There are just so many incredible applications out there. Electric Juice are another one. Google Maps would be great to get on board. And then it's the actual sat nav systems within the vehicles themselves that I'm really keen to get the ChargeSafe rating onto. Failing all else, if nobody's sure where to look for the ChargeSafe rating, it will be available on our website. But our website isn't really a fantastic navigational tool for charge points. That side of things will be only for the inspectors to sort of map out what their day is going to look like in terms of which chargers they'll be visiting and
Right.
scheduling their workload. So it's going to be on our website, but by no means it won't be a way to plot a journey. It will just be, this charge point has this score.
What's the business model for this venture? Presumably, it will need money to operate, especially if you're going to be paying inspectors and getting them electric vehicles. Where's the money coming from?
That's a very good question, Gary. And to be honest, I don't know just yet. So we have been pitching to angel investors left, right, and centre. We are looking for investment to get things off the ground. But failing that, we have just pitched for a trial, which is quite exciting and would certainly allow us to start the ball rolling, to be able to produce a test set of data to show how the system's going to work, and to hopefully start getting those network subscriptions in on an ongoing basis after that initial investment, which will help us set up all the things that we need to get, such as the technology, get some inspectors on board, kit them out with a car, with the iPads, mobile phones, etc. they're going to need to use, as well as paying for services. So much that goes into it. We will be charging the networks, which is a hilarious role reversal, to pay for the data. So basically, it comes in really from two main streams, the way we look at it. You've got a monetization avenue from the data requests from the third-party applications using
Mm-hmm.
an API key, which is like something ridiculous, like 0.001 pounds per per request. I
Okay.
could be completely wrong with that, but it's definitely less than what Google charge when you make a data request with them on a business case.
Mm-hmm.
So there will be the data requests provides one revenue stream, which at this moment in time now would be quite modest. But in 10 years' time, when those charge points are almost at 500,000, and the amount of EV drivers on the roads, goodness knows what those projections are going to be like. But I mean, at the moment, 40% of total market share for plug-in vehicles in January 22, not too shabby.
No.
It's just going to continue to grow. So the more requests will actually be made for the data from the people who are driving the electric vehicles, and therefore that revenue grows and grows and grows. And then the subscriptions work in a way that every network will be scored. Every charge point is going to receive a score. Now, that could either be visible via the public website, which says this charge point has a score of 4.7. If the network then wants to understand why they've received that score, we can provide them with the inspector data and also a real-time dashboard of the user ratings that are coming through, which will highlight the key concerns, any trends, and any improvements that could help increase that score. So over time, the networks will be able to improve their entire network, and they'll have visibility on what's wrong with the network. And they'll need to pay for that data, because that's going to be the thing that enables us to continue with the service and roll out of ChargeSafe. Eventually, we'll have a third revenue stream, which will be via the accreditation. So if a particular network, product or service would like to say that they are ChargeSafe accredited, then they can come on board. We'll make sure that they meet up to those standards, and then they'll have like an annual rolling accreditation, so that they can pop it on the side of the charger to say this is a ChargeSafe accredited certified charger, and meets a certain standard over the golden standard, essentially. So it could be like more than 4.5 stars, but they have to keep up that standard across the year in order to be able to reapply for that certification year on year.
Yeah.
And then there's other things that we'd really love to do, Gary. So I was having a chat with the AA about it, and I think it would be a really lovely idea, especially for people who are sat on their own in the dark of night feeling a bit unsafe. If you're sat at a charger and it's dark and you're able to charge and you feel unsafe, but you don't really want to wake up anyone at 2 o'clock in the morning to tell them that you feel unsafe and to make them feel concerned that you might be unsafe, you should be able to call a customer service line who would then sit there on the phone to you for 20 minutes as a Chargepoint companion. You could talk about anything and everything. Talk about the weather. You could talk about the latest Bond film, whatever. But at that point in time, no crime has occurred, so you can't really call the police, and you can't call the non-emergency police to say, I don't feel safe, because they're not really going to feel compelled to do anything about that. But a Chargepoint companion means that they'll know exactly where you are. So if anything happens, they can raise an alarm.
Yeah.
And for me, it's a good alternative to having that emergency alarm on the charge point, because so you don't have to leave the car in order to raise that alarm.
Yeah.
But if you feel really, really unsafe, wouldn't it be great to have a roadside assistance van to pull up and just sit and charge with you, just to be present whilst you charge, from a safe and trusted and reliable company that we all know and love. I just think ChargePoint companions would be a lovely service to provide.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's an excellent thought. There are two questions that jump immediately to mind when you talk about getting the Chargepoint operators involved in this and accreditation and things like that.
Yeah.
Now, as I think you already said, Ian Johnson, you've chatted with him. He's been on the podcast before. I know him quite well. So when I first heard about this, I thought this is something that Ian will go for, and I believe that's right. Have you spoken? I mean, you don't need to name any names, but how many other Chargepoint operators have you had discussions with about this?
So Ian has been amazing and incredible support behind it. I've spoken to a couple of others. One, which I can't name, did raise some concerns that it might not work necessarily, because safety checks were carried out anyway in the industry. And for me, it was very much a case of, isn't that like marking your own homework? And actually, if we set these standards for every charge point operator in the UK, then everybody has to measure up to that standard. So you can't necessarily say, yeah, we're fantastic and we're the safest, because by what measure? And how do we not know that your measure is better than CPO number 2, for example? So I think it was good to get that feedback, and I've had so much positivity coming in that I really wanted some criticism at that point. You know, I wanted someone to pick holes in the idea and say, oh, I don't think this is going to work for that reason. But it actually really armed me and reinforced me to in the belief that this is going to be a really beneficial thing, because we're a completely independent business from the ChargePoint networks and from the mapping services, and we are representing the drivers and the chargees themselves and saying, yeah, this is what's going to make everybody feel safe. This is what we need you to do. We need you to help us, create the standard. I've also spoken with another ChargePoint network who have said, yeah, we love what you do. This sounds like a great idea. We're not sure that everybody's going to be too keen about installing new lighting and stuff at their charge points. And it was just a case of, yes, but if they don't, a competitor will move in next to them, and they will. So it's now a case of, if you have legacy chargers, if you privately own a charger, it's on your property and it's not well lit and it doesn't meet up with the ChargeSafe standards, please make those improvements, because not only are you protecting the safety of the people using your product on your land, but you're also going to be making an investment for the future, so that more people will then be drawn to your charge point and will want to use it and will feel safe to do so. And it might just put off the competitors from moving in next door.
I totally 100% agree with everything you've said there, but one of the roles that I like to take when I interview people is that of devil's advocate. And the one thing I would say is, and again, without naming any names, we know that there are certain networks, and I'm talking in the plural here, not just the singular, who know that they are lacking in certain areas. For example, charger reliability, contactless payments, that sort of stuff. And they know that they have to upgrade. They know they have to improve.
Yes.
And they blatantly don't.
Yes. And I am so going to enjoy this in a really sick and twisted way, because I have fallen so foul of these chargers, of plural networks, of course. Now, for the ChargePoint operators who fail to keep up with the operations and maintenance needs of their chargers, or fail to respond to the user feedback in terms of the ease of payment, they are the ones who will receive the lower ChargeSafe ratings. And as a result, they may find that their usual user base will pop off to another ChargePoint operator who will probably build just up the road from them anyway, because, you know, if we've got less than 10% of the projected growth of EV charge point installations in the UK now, there are going to be neighbours popping up in the next decade. So if you don't look after your network and you don't listen to your customers, they will go elsewhere. And we're going to give them the score that will help make that decision a little bit easier. So do what's right for your customer. Don't worry about what other commitments you've got. Focus on your O&M. It's really important. If a charger's faulty and you drive to a faulty charger at 2:00 in the morning and you've got 10 miles range left, what about the safety of that person? It's ridiculous. There are so many chargers out there that I'm aware, having seen on Twitter, have been installed and not switched on.
Oh, yeah.
Well, where's the sensibility in that? Just go switch it on. I'm sure you can afford an engineer to go out and go, yeah, okay, that's all safe. Let's switch it on. I could be completely wrong. I'm definitely not qualified to say how easy it is for an engineer to go and switch on a machine. But I'm pretty sure that some of these networks, they're quite big, Gary. I think they've got a lot of money.
I heard, yeah.
They could probably do something with it, couldn't they? Like invest in the future, invest in the green revolution. But I mean, I'm biased towards electric vehicles. So what do I know? But, you know.
Are you looking, and I think I know the answer to this, but I'll ask it anyway. Are you looking at some sort of enforcement protocol for operators who score low but don't improve? I mean, you've said that in a way there's going to be a market correction, which is if you don't improve your chargers, nobody's going to use them. Somebody else is going to come up next door and you're going to start losing money. But have you thought about maybe formalizing that enforcement and saying there will be a financial penalty if you as an average don't get above 2.5 or whatever across your network?
I'm not sure if I could. So, for example, if a ChargePoint operator is especially naughty and doesn't look after their network, but also isn't a subscriber, I mean, I can't just send them a bill and say, well, you've been naughty, so you need to pay this money. That's not possible. But what I can do is take it to government and lobby for a mandate. And then everybody will just have to play ball. So I know it sounds really kind of strict and sassy of me to do that. But moving forward, in 20, 30 years, so many more vehicles on the road are going to be electric. These charge points are going to become fundamental to people's livelihoods in being able to get to and from work or to do the food shop, or, if they need to go to hospital, they're going to need these cars. So you need to look after your networks and you need to make sure that they're safe and people aren't going to be electrocuted if they try to use them, which I know is highly unlikely anyway because of all the stringent safety measures in place. But I think at this moment in time, we are so lucky that there has not been a headline that has said that somebody's been attacked at a charge point. And it's my ambition that never happens. I never want to see that headline. So it really is a case of putting the stake in the ground now and saying, guys, we've got to make this better. And the good thing is we're early enough into the journey to really positively impact, how the landscape of electric vehicle charging looks, and to set those measures for the future.
And if you look at, what we've got now in terms of fossil fuels, I mean, we badmouth fossil fuels left, right and centre, and quite rightly, but you go to a petrol station and it's well lit and it's covered and it's usually manned and it's open 24 hours a day, more often than not. And, the whole experience, if you take away the fact that, you're piping combustible fluid that stinks and pollutes, if you take that away, the actual experience of being at a service station in the vast majority of situations is far superior to wandering around the back of a pub or a hotel into a dark car park and finding a single charger and having to work that out. So
I mean, absolutely. Why do they get this divine experience where they can rock up and it's all well lit? And I'm not even joking, Gary. How many times have you been to a petrol station and gone to look for a charger and it's literally around the back in a dark corner again, or in the bushes, or fenced off, so you've got to hide behind a fence, like you're the naughty cousin that nobody should know about. We just get treated like these second-class citizens on petrol forecourts, and it drives me mad. And I think I was saying, the other day, why do we deserve to be in the bush? I want to come out from the bush. I want to be well lit. I want to be seen. EV drivers don't belong in bushes and dark corners. They deserve better.
Indeed, our time will come. On the subject of time, what is the timeline for this?
Okay, so currently we are looking at doing a soft launch where we start to collect the data in April. We will be publishing the first set of safety scores, hopefully around mid-May, with dashboards being made available to any subscribing networks. We will also be announcing who the subscribing networks are, so everybody can see just how safety conscious they are and on board and really complying and wanting to strive for that positive change. We will then be doing a much harder launch towards the end of summer 22. And hopefully by then we will have at least 2 inspectors on board with plans to employ a further 8 before autumn. And then depending on the amount of networks we get on board, that really is going to signal how many inspectors we can hire. But the ambition is that we have 100 by the end of 2023.
I hope you beat that timeline. It's very ambitious, but I think it's an excellent initiative and something that I hope is a huge success.
Thanks very much, Gary. I really appreciate the support.
Many thanks to Kate for her time. If you want to become part of the inspection team, follow the link in show notes and register your interest. It's time for a cool EV or renewable thing to share with your listeners. Researchers in Russia have found a way to leverage a large chunk of the medical waste that's been produced as a result of the pandemic, specifically the single-use face masks. The scientists repurposed used face masks into highly efficient textile supercapacitors and used waste drug blister packs as a shell, thus forming the basis for creating batteries. Apparently, the high volume and ease of gathering the disposable face masks meant they were able to do this easier and cheaper than with other waste materials, which generally needed more energy-intensive methods to process. The team said the mask-derived batteries were superior in several ways to heavier metal-coated conventional batteries, which had greater manufacturing costs and didn't have the added benefit of diverting polymer waste from landfill. They said the resulting batteries had a high density of stored energy and electrical capacity of up to 98 watt-hours per kilogram, which puts them in the ballpark of the current average lithium-ion batteries. I love this, and I hope that they're able to take this from the lab and commercialise it on a large scale. The EV Musings podcast is sponsored by ZapMap. ZapMap is the go-to app for EV drivers in the UK. Use it to search for available chargers, plan electric journeys, pay for charging on participating networks, and share updates with other EV drivers. ZapMap is free to download and use, with subscription plans for enhanced features such as using ZapMap in-car, on CarPlay, or Android Auto. And that's the show for today. Hope you enjoyed listening to it. If you want to contact me, I can be emailed at evmusings@gmail.com. I'm also on Twitter @musingsev. If you want to support the podcast and newsletter, please consider contributing to becoming an EV Musings patron. The link is in the show notes. Don't want to sign up for something on a monthly basis? Well, if you enjoyed this episode, why not buy me a coffee? Go to ko-fi.com/evmusings, that's ko-fi.com/evmusings, and you can do just that. Takes Apple Pay too. If you want a quick reference ebook to read on your Kindle, I wrote a little something called So You've Gone Electric. It's available on Amazon worldwide for the measly sum of 99p or equivalent, and it's a great little introduction to living with an electric car. Please check it out. Links for everything we've talked about in the podcast today are in the description. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe. It's available on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. Please leave a review as it helps raise visibility and extend our reach in search engines. If you've reached this part of the podcast and are still listening, thank you. Why not let me know you've got to this point by tweeting me @musingsev with the words, "Unlit end of an empty car park." #if you know you know. Nothing else. Thanks as always to my co-founder Simon. You know, I caught him listening to Pavarotti singing Nessun Dorma recently. He admitted he's a huge fan of opera and he wants to put a quartet of singers together himself. He's got the bass, alto and the soprano. He's just missing one singer, but he has an inside contact at the National Opera.
Maz Shah, love him,
Yep.
actually sent me a tenner to help me on that one occasion.
Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.